Hey, rookies, and welcome back to the Rookie Farmer Podcast. This is the home of the dreamers, the schemers, and the hustlers here in the world of small scale agriculture. And if you haven't met me yet, my name is Alec Smith. I am the host here, and I'm also the farmer at Crop Culture Farm here in New Bern, Georgia. We have a real treat for you this week. On this episode, we sit down for an interview with Michelle Hochkeppel. She is a sales rep with High Mowing Organic Seeds. Now, High Mowing is a company that I support. It's a company that I use their seed on our farm, and I have always been blown away with the quality, the consistency, and the variety that they have. So I reached out to Michelle to see if she could give us a little bit of a behind the scenes look at how they source their seed, why having really good high quality organic seed is important, and how her as my sales rep, she can give me the advice that I need to make sure I'm growing the right stuff, and how high mowing can really give you the edge above in your growing. So sit down and buckle up for another episode of the Rookie Farmer Podcast, this time with Michelle Hochkeppel of High Mowing Organic Seed. All right, today we have the awesome pleasure of sitting down with Michelle with High Mowing Organic Seeds. Michelle, if you wouldn't mind, just take a second, kind of tell everybody who you are, and a little bit of a background and history on what high mowing is.
Yeah, sure. Hello, my name is Michelle. I'm the commercial grower seed representative for High Mowing Organic Seeds. High Mowing is a an all organic seed company focusing on hybrid, open pollinated, and heirloom varieties. I've been around for almost 30 years, started in 1996, located in Vermont's Northeast Kingdom. And we work with, all 50 states and Canada. So that's kind of our regions. Um, Heimann was started by Tom Stearns, and I, at the time, started with 28 varieties, and now we're up to over 700 organic varieties.
That's awesome. And did you say the remind me the area? Did you say the Northeast Kingdom?
Yeah, Vermont has some regions, like some designated regions, and High Mowing is located in a town called Wolcott, and which is also known as Northeast Kingdom. So super north, very close to the
Okay.
Canadian border.
I didn't know if that was like an actual like sort of municipality or if it's just like a colloquial term.
I think it's more a colloquial term. Yeah.
Gotcha. So if that's the kingdom, what's your status in the king's court? Are you
We are peasants in the
oh, you're
kingdom.
just the peasants, okay. I didn't know if you were like court jester or uh
No,
no.
we are stewards. We are there to serve.
Gotcha. Awesome. Uh yeah, now I think just like right off the bat, one of the things that I found really interesting is that at least within this sort of small scale agriculture, organic vegetable production space, and flowers for that matter, that there seems to be a lot of sort of energy and work centered around kind of New England and the northeast part of the United States. Yet you do serve all 50 states and you're working all over the country. Um, and I'd kind of like to understand a little bit more, sort of how having a seed company based out of Vermont can still grow extremely like effective, productive varieties for, Georgia or California or any of the other places that you guys sell to.
Yeah, that's a great question. Though we started as a small company that focused on growing our own seed, producing our own seed, and giving away, and then evolved into selling our own seed. We have evolved into diversifying the pathways in which we um, attain seed and distribute seed. So we work with a variety of producers in that way, and so seed is actually the seed that we offer is from all over. It's not specifically from Vermont, which is a common misconception. I think that particularly the energy around New England and the seed movement, that's so clearly represented there was kind of a product of the back to the land
Hmm.
movements. And that happened all over, but for whatever reason, seemed to really take hold in seed in the New England area. And I think that's also can be said of the Pacific Northwest, that there are quite a few regional seed companies in the PNW as well that have that sort of um, origins in back to the land movements. Yeah, but to go back to the pathways that exist in which we source seed, I think this is like one of the most important things for growers to understand. And I say that like as a grower myself, it's something I didn't really have any knowledge of when I was working on farms, but knowing where your seed comes from and why varieties come in and out of
Hmm.
catalogs and availability and inventory, it is this much larger web of what is happening behind the seeds, behind the scenes.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
um, but and there's like a wealth of information in every single catalog, but most of the time when as growers, we're just like looking for the new stuff or you're just circling the really pretty ones.
Hmm.
And we're missing some of the really crucial information that is there in the write-ups and kind of like between the lines. Um, so if you don't mind, I can go into like kind of what those pathways are.
Yeah, absolutely. Please go for
Sure.
it.
So we kind of have four main pathways in which we source seed and like bring like varietal material into the catalog. Um, so one of those pathways is known as vendor breeders. We work with vendor breeders, which is kind of also known as seed companies. So a lot of these larger companies that are oftentimes based in the Netherlands or in Europe that have breeding hubs all over the world. So they're actually doing a lot of the breeding trials, and then we're able to bring in their material and offer it in digestible sizes for small scale growers. So that's one of the largest pathways. Also, public breeding programs. So that's like working with land grant universities who are doing selections on varieties year over year. We will work with them to give feedback on varietal selections and then move things into larger productions and make them available. We also work with participatory breeding groups. So these are groups like Organic Seed Alliance. They're kind
Hmm.
of like regional uh, regional organizations that use organizing and collaboration to influence seed development. And then, of course, farmer breeders, like people who are working on their own selections on their farms and have stabilized a breeding population, and then we are able to offer that in the catalog.
Awesome. So it sounds like that. I mean, at any given moment, you could be pulling seed from, theoretically, like different parts of the world, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that is becoming more and more important and that we have been talking about more and more is the value that exists in diversifying where we're getting seed, but also making sure that we are being able to meet everybody's needs.
Hmm.
We're in such a need for resilient seed varieties because of climate change that having things that are grown in the southeast are incredibly important and valuable to the folks who are growing food in the south and the southeast. And
Yeah.
so one of the things that we have done over the past handful of years has really increased our contract growing department. And so right now we have about 148 of our 700 varieties that are grown via contract for production. And so those are happening throughout the US, and really gaining a lot of popularity for a lot of farmers as well as they want to diversify their income or explore farm production in a different way. Yeah.
And by the time that seed comes to you, when it's various uh, channels of getting to you. Now, is that like a finished product, like it's ready to go, or is there still processing that's required on High Mowing's end, or is it more just like take it, sort of divvy it out into the various sizes for packages, and then it gets kind of warehoused and then shipped out?
Yeah, so we always I think the hope is that it comes as clean as it could
Mm,
possibly be, which is pretty challenging depending on the scale and the resources that people have access to. Like seed cleaning tools are there's a pretty broad spectrum, especially for small scale farms. It could be as simple as like a tarp and a box fan and a bucket. Um, and then there are things that are amazing, like the Winnow Wizard, which, is a really cool tool, but still, not something that anybody can buy. I mean, anyone could buy it, but you
yeah.
really have to be able to make it worth your while. So the hope is that it comes to High Mowing fairly clean. We do have some resources in terms of like referring folks regionally to other people who may help with that process. And then we have, of course, our own tools and quality control that we use on site. And then we'll take that bulk, whatever we've cleaned up, and pack it up, and
Yeah.
distribute.
Awesome. That's cool. Um, I know one thing that really separates you guys from a lot of the other folks kind of in this space is that everything that you sell is 100% organic, which is great. As a certified naturally grown farmer myself, everything that I use, I have to be NOP compliant and I need to be using organic seed whenever I can. And so it's a huge benefit and it's a big weight off my shoulders to not wonder like, oh man, I bought this turnip, like, oh crap, did I remember to buy the organic one or not? I want to do whatever I can to remain compliant, not just from a follow the rules perspective, but just from a it falls in with my ideology, the way that I want to grow, and wanting to eliminate sort of pesticide, herbicide use and synthetic fertilizers. And so I love that I can just go on there and order whatever I want to and never have to think twice about that. But can you kind of touch on some of like the purpose and the importance of organic seed?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it is incredibly convenient for certifiers in particular to just know that X amount of seed is from high mowing and therefore not an issue. That's definitely helpful. I think, you know, the state of organics, maybe that's like a little off topic, but it's really curious to think about like where we are nationally versus where we were 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Like when high mowing started, really?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and like where things have gone and where they might continue to go. Like uh that is something that's very unknown and it's often changing. And I think because it is quite values based, it can be hard to get a handle on where people are. It's also inherently more expensive,
Yeah.
to support organic seed and organics, because it takes a lot more labor to do so. You know, Organic seed, I think, is important because there's just less chemical inputs that are going into our seed. Conventional seed is one of the most chemically intensive types of agriculture. Those
Oh,
seed
interesting.
are not, because they're not used for human consumption.
Mm,
There are different pesticide regulations, which are less stringent. Um, Organic seed crops are more heavily regulated, and they also tend to take into account the larger ecological landscape as well in their production. And I think larger than that, even though that's like pretty
yeah.
crucial, organically produced seed is developed with the purpose that it will do better in organic systems. Like that is the
Mm,
overall goal. You think about something that is being bred for a particular environment, then it's going to thrive in that environment. That's the hope. Of course, genetically seed is or organic seed is not genetically modified. I think that's a huge one. We're continuing to learn more about what that means, but their genetically modified ingredients are becoming like way more ubiquitous
mhm.
in everyday life. It's like becoming harder to avoid that. So making a conscious decision about where you are putting your money, it is starting to speak a lot more to your values and like what you're behind. I think we're seeing that more and more in our economy, in our culture as things evolve. It's pretty fascinating. I mean, organic seed, it began at this really base level with open pollinated varieties, these varieties that were just out there kind of for people to play with, like very like heirloom varieties like lacinato kale
Mhm.
and scarlet Nance carrot. Like they were just out there and people were producing them and that's what organic growers had to rely on for a really long time. I think then at some point that developed into organic growers relying on hybrid seeds, which are bred for disease resistance and productivity, increased yields. And that was super important and crucial. It's like this important joint for organics, for the organic movement. But I think what's interesting now as we kind of keep progressing in organics is that now there are companies that are breeding specifically for organics, kind of instead of just moving these conventional varieties
Mm.
into organic productions. And now you're seeing companies and breeders invest more in making open pollinated varieties that have the same like that have disease resistances but are less expensive because they are more affordable to produce because they're open pollinated.
And is that primarily just from a practical standpoint of you can have a kind of a seed crop of things and as long as you're not like crossing different varieties, you can allow nature to kind of run its course as opposed to hybrid varieties where you're having to like physically pollinate and isolate and separate flowers. Is that really where the difference in cost comes from with those?
Absolutely. If you think about a hybrid variety is one that is produced by cross-pollinating two distinct parent lines. They are being selected for their genetics, whether
Mhm.
those traits are color or flavor or yield or disease resistance, days to maturity, I think often are a part of that too. That takes in most scenarios a lot of hands-on labor for that to happen. And sometimes, we also have those biennial crops. So those
Yeah.
beets and carrots, and those are taking two cycles in order to get the seed that you want. So, those are absolutely more expensive. Open pollinated varieties, these are seeds that have been fertilized by natural means, either by wind or insects or birds. And so there's just like a whole lot less human
Mhm.
interaction with what is going on naturally. And so if we can select based on what we're looking for and reproduce that pretty easily, then we're getting like one step closer. And I think that just wasn't in the mindset at the like for a period of time. But now that I think organics has gained an amount of momentum, and particularly in Europe, I think they just passed something that all farm production needs to be organic by a certain date.
Oh,
Um,
I'll have to look into that. I love
yeah, so
that.
So their breeding is even more swaying towards the side of organic production as well. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that I noticed in my sort of progression away from sort of like homesteading, home gardening, where so many of us start and then ultimately end up sort of in the production world of actual agriculture farming is I felt like in that like homestead space there's such an emphasis on heirloom varieties and seed saving and doing that, which I love. And the other farm that I've worked on and I have experience with, there is seed saving that's going on and it's really great, and you're seeing a lot of benefit from that. Being able to isolate some genetics, build some resistance, and just growing things that are regionally adapted to literally the soil, the air, the conditions on that specific farm. But I was really surprised at how much of a shift that it was from those heirloom varieties that are usually incredibly delicious and just gorgeous to look at, but don't seem to have the production necessary to really effectively turn a profit. And so if before we kind of get into the difference, can you sort of explain to me the difference between you touched on open pollinated and heirloom, but sort of like what are open pollinated and hybrid? But if you can sort of explain to me like what is heirloom and how does it differentiate from specifically open pollinated seeds?
Yeah, I find this more of a marker, similar to what you're saying. Heirloom varieties are these are the ones that I think of as like the backbone of, in our case, organics.
Hmm.
Heirlooms are open pollinated varieties. They're the ones that have kind of stood the test of time, have been
Hmm.
around for years. Um,
Do you know what there's an actual distinction, right? There's like a time, is it 60 years or something? Do you I can't remember.
Actually, but that would make sense, about that timeline. We also tend to refer to these varieties as like varieties in the commons because they have the genetic material that has been around for so long.
Yeah.
But you could buy lacinato kale from 5 different sources and probably get a very different
Mhm.
thing, similar but different out of each one of those. And that's because those productions are happening in different areas. Each of those sources have different quality control standards. They probably all have different germination rates. So there's like so many different factors that go into play, including where you are also planting them. So there's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
those added elements as well. Um, yeah.
I mean, would you say from your experience that with commercial growers, whether they're like kind of small scale market gardeners like me or, large productions, is it usually a good mix? Like, do you see a trend that it's like the commercial growers tend to favor the hybrid varieties or maybe the more productive open pollinated ones as opposed to some of the other ones that, might look prettier or a little bit more unique?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this is more um, about scale in the
Hmm.
focus of the farm. And I have farms that are across the board. I have some farms that only support high heirlooms and OPs, and then I have some that just need the disease resistance, and
Yeah.
they won't want to take the chance on something else. And I think that's a little bit of like what your experience is and where you come from and what your background is. It's also where you're located. I mean, the East Coast is historically the Mid Atlantic, like totally hit by like massive disease pressures
Yeah.
and that, and like can't really grow everything, and so they need the disease resistance in order to be able to get some squash.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're telling me.
Yeah, I mean, you at some point, if you're a business, your goal at the end of the day is that you need to walk away with some profit. And if a hybrid is going to help you get there, then you got to try it out. If you have an OP or an heirloom that is working for you and it's giving you what you need, then why go anywhere else? Like
Hmm.
use that beautiful variety. I also think that there was a time, or people have maybe misconceptions about what hybrids are, and that sort of turns them off to hybrids.
Like,
Uh,
do people think that like hybrid means that they're GMO?
well, I don't I don't think so, but they could,
Yeah.
they could. I mean,
I've had people ask me that before. Like, they're like tell them like we grow, oh, it's a hybrid variety, and they like, oh, like you're growing some sort of weird like genetic freak of like I didn't cross like a cucumber with a pepper here. Like, we're just crossing pepper varieties to get something that's going to be really productive.
right. Yeah. Yeah. So to continue to try to answer your question, a lot of times with kind of those high market value crops like peppers and
Hmm.
tomatoes, if I have growers who are growing those in high tunnels and like really focusing on market garden style, high intensive um, production, then I will absolutely suggest the hybrid varieties
Hmm.
that are going to be more reliable in those situations and going to have the yields and production that folks are looking for. But again, it is scale. Like there are farms that are just growing field tomatoes, and maybe you are picking so fast because you are doing 5 acres of field tomatoes that you do not need a hybrid.
Yeah, you don't need to get every single tomato to count, towards your bottom line. No, I mean, and yeah, that is an interesting way of thinking about it, because obviously the intent of this is to educate, encourage people to kind of get into the space. And so, this is like a side of agriculture that is, I mean, it's integral. There's if without seed, there's nothing to plant and nothing to grow, and therefore nothing to sell and to feed people with. But there's not, I just don't feel like there's a whole lot of information out there that it's like, here's where your seed comes from. I mean, you kind of have to hunt for it, and you have to, and it's like, here's the difference between all these different things and why we use this. I know there's some, Jesse Frost with No Till Growers has put out a lot of good stuff talking about the seed that he uses and specifically why. But even understanding the context of a particular crop makes a big difference. Like, for instance, I grow my cucumbers outside, trellised, because I'm trying to keep them up off the ground. I'm outside. It's very humid here in the summertime. And so I really need like a good hybrid variety that's going to be productive and extremely disease resistant. Keep all the mildew off, and everything that wants to eat it. Where the other farm that I worked at, they're growing them in the tunnel, on the ground, on plastic. So there's way less of an issue with disease, and it's on drip tape. So theoretically, there's never a drop of water that touches those cucumbers. And it's sort of like run and gun. Like, we get in and you have a few weeks of like really hard harvests, and then they're out, and then there's another tunnel that's planted. And so with that, he doesn't even bother with investing in like a really highly productive, highly disease resistant hybrid, because it's just, it, like you said, it's like if you're just really cranking out production, you can, a 10% drop in that production, you're not really going to feel it, as opposed to me on my limited amount of space. I've got this one bed and I have to make it count. I need every cucumber to do that. So yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't put too much thought to, not just is it going to be more productive or less, but understanding the context of one or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like that making that choice, and I think it depends. If you're working with a chef, and the chef is like, I want this patty pan squash, and or maybe there's like a, I've actually had restaurants reach out to me like, we want Jimmy Nardello peppers, and I'm like,
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, well, they're, because I believe it's at least OP. I don't know if it's considered an heirloom or not. Yeah, I can't remember.
I think that's just an OP. Yeah.
Yeah, but either way, it's like, I sort of know some of the challenges and hoops I'm gonna have to jump through with that, as opposed to growing something that will be hybridized, be much better for our growing region. And so, but if I have the market outlet for that I can justify the drop in production or the lack of disease resistance or whatever, then yeah, it might make sense. But for me, it's sort of like whatever the increase in profit of a particular crop tends to lean toward an increase in relying on extremely high quality seed. So something like, a salad turnip, a Tokyo turnip or a Hakurai or a radish or something like that. Like that's really quick in and out. It's not as highly profitable. And so I kind of want to just get something that I know works and I know people will buy. But then if we get into something like a spring mix or a lettuce mix or something, I am more apt to go for something that may or may not be hybrid, but it's going to be pelleted because it's like my profit margin on salad mix is significant. It's at least double, if not more, than it is on something like a turnip. And so, I'm more apt to do that. Or then you even go further with something like a tomato, where I would never in a million years consider spending, $30 for 50 seeds for, a turnip. But obviously something like a tomato that, yeah, there's like the huge opportunity for great profit that, it's like, yeah, like you're willing to invest in that because, there's a potential to make a good amount from there, but also like it's going to be with you for a while. And I feel like there's a lot more issues with a tomato, at least within our climate, than there is with, like something like a root veg.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like for folks who are just starting out, it's great to start out with
Mm,
OPs and heirlooms and get a feel for just what is going on. I think the excitement around growing for most of us tends to get us to try too many things at
yeah.
once. and
Uh-huh.
then it's really hard to keep track of what's happening for each one of those varieties, each one of those crops even. Um, and observation is one of the like strongest
Mm,
and most pertinent characteristics of almost every farmer I know. You have to be able to like see what's going on with your crop, know what's happening to it, know what it needs. Is that a disease? Is that a pest? Or does it just need more nutrients? Is it deficient in some way? Did I not water it properly? Like it takes a long time to even understand that arc. And so I think it's just like save for now. And then when you find out what your specialty crops are or what you really want to lean into, then you can kind of keep like get into the hybrids. Or if you just know that you're going to grow cucumbers and you're going to make it work,
mhm,
you're gonna, do 3 week sessions in the South, then try every cucumber there is and see how it goes. Um, and then the other thing I wanted to say, because we were talking about it, and I just so happen to have my catalog here, is that catalogs are, I think, one of the most amazing resources that
absolutely.
these companies put out. And there's one piece about seeing what they look like. But these little write ups, they have all of the information that you need. And aside from like being able to compare your days to maturity and figure out which one you want to put into your crop plan, um, I would say like most of our varieties in our catalogs will tell you exactly where they come from, like who
Mm,
produced them, where they're coming from. And if those are things that people are interested in knowing, like the information is absolutely discoverable.
yeah. If we've already sort of touched on the answer to this question, then we can just move on.
Hmm.
But before we get into some understanding of sort of your role and how folks can best utilize what you do to help them as growers, another big observation that I made, especially in my first year farming, is that the quality of seed makes a far bigger difference than you would think. Even if, like you said, even if it's two different seeds that are both like a lacinato kale or, you know, a Danvers carrot or whatever it may be. You think like, all right, it's the same variety, it's going to be the same across the board. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Over the years, and even last year, my goal is to not have to do it all this year. And I got tempted today when I went to the hardware store. But you walk past the racks of seed and you're like, I just spent like, that seed order was like $450 that I just did the other day. But, maybe that one cherry bell radish, like it's calling to me and I need to grab it. And so I've grown a lot of stuff from, you know, amazing reputable companies like High Mowing, or some of the ones that are more like regionally adapted to my area, all the way down to, random seeds that I found on Etsy, or stuff from the hardware store, those kind of the two or three big brands that are at the hardware store. And it just from a like germination standpoint, I say that's probably then the biggest difference, is to be able to see like, all right, well, yeah, we'll just stick with the lacinato kale metaphor here. It's like, yeah, like do a whole tray of lacinato or something like a black magic, which technically, it's a hybrid, but something like that from High Mowing, and then to something else from the hardware store. And I mean, it's night and day. It's totally different. And even though those might be the same variety, like why is like better seed stock from, not that those companies aren't reputable, but from like a highly reputable company that is like dedicated their whole business to just producing the highest quality. Like, why does that make so much of a difference?
Yeah, there's a lot of points to make here. Um, I think the first thing that kind of comes to mind for me is that the USDA has federal minimums that
Mhm.
seeds need to hit for germination standards, like across the board. So my interpretation of that is if you're selling seed, then the seed that you sell needs to hit this federal minimum. I can't speak for other companies, but High Mowing's minimum is higher than the federal minimum. So let's take an example that I don't really know the answer to, but let's say that the minimum for carrots is, you know, 70% or something like that. We will have seed lots come in anywhere between 72 and 98%. And if it's hitting our min, which is
Mm.
76, then it's fine and we'll sell it. If it's coming in lower, then we'll decide how we want to handle that. And most times we decide that we don't want to offer it, um, and we won't sell it. So that's like I think that's a different method than a lot of folks, but I can't really speak to how other people do it, as I've never worked for any other seed company before. But that has definitely stood out to me over the years. On top of that, I over the past 10 years, High Mowing has really upped its game in terms of quality control. So that can mean anywhere from freezing seed that comes in, things like helots that tend to have weevils in them. You will freeze them for usually it's about 21 days, so almost a month, in these massive in these massive freezers. And that will improve the germination rate over time and reduce the damage. And then we have a lot of tools, a lot of quality control tools like seed tables that will basically like slew off seed that is not viable and that
Mm.
doesn't have like the preferred weight for a specific crop type, and then it will just sort of like get rid of that seed. And so that will also increase our overall germination for the seed that we have available. And I think it's worth saying that this is another reason why seed availability and inventory fluctuates annually and almost for every crop, is that there are if you think about it in this way, if a seed grower is producing a seed lot and they think that they're going to get 60 pounds of this seed, but then, there's a flood and half of
Mhm.
their fields flood, then they lose half of that crop and they only have 30 pounds of that seed. They send us their 30 pounds. And by the time it gets cleaned and we clean up that germination, and make sure that it's like up to our standards, then we have 15 pounds of that lot. So this item that we thought, this variety that we thought was originally going to be 60 pounds is now 15. And, 1,000 people have ordered
Yeah.
20 pounds of it. And so that's why we have out of stock notices and back order dates and things that are pretty confusing to a lot of people and really don't tend to exist in many other industries, to be frank. There are definitely back ordered items, but they're often not relying on annual cycles, or maybe they
Mhm.
are, and I'm just not, tuned into that.
But I mean, and also, I mean, there's the reality of it is that it's an agricultural product. It's not really much different than the vegetables that we take to market at the end of the day. In some years you have, a good summer squash year, and other years you don't. Whether it's, not even just like something like a flood that takes out, but maybe you just have too much rain or not enough rain or so, or you get the first snow that you've had in 11 years, like we're having right now, and it's, wreaking havoc on some of our winter greens that normally would be like jamming and they've just stopped growing. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's still a agricultural product that is at the mercy of Mother Nature and the land and all those sort of things.
Right.
Um,
And hopefully really cold snap that you are experiencing will make for a much smoother spring for you
yeah,
because you'll have, like, less pests.
I hope. Something keeps hammering the tatsu, and I'm like, all right, it must be like burrowing into the soil and then coming back out to eat on the warm days or something. But I'll figure it out. But everything else, yeah, no grasshoppers, so we're good. So before we kind of get into what you do and how you can really benefit growers out there, can you give me a quick little background on what your growing experience and history was?
Yeah, totally. I came to farming from food. I started working in restaurants when I was in college and didn't see a whole lot of fresh food coming in the door at that time. I finally worked for a restaurant that did work with some farmers, and I was like, oh, what is happening? Around that same time, that same kind of like college aged time, that's when you are responsible for surviving and buying
Yeah,
your own food most of the time. And I remember going into grocery stores or farmers markets and seeing kind of like two sides being available, the conventional side and the organic side. And I remember being incredibly confused by that and not really understanding. Like, there's literally no other information
yeah,
other than these names and the prices of the things that you are looking at. From those experiences, I decided to take kind of a gap year and work on farms. And I started woofing, working on farms in that way. And after my first one, I was like pretty much hooked. And so I did a few woofing experiences in Central and South America, and then I came back
awesome.
to do some growing seasons here in Vermont and Georgia, Oregon and Idaho. So I definitely bounced around
Got a
quite a
lot of different geographical experience too. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
Where in Central America were you?
yeah. I was in Ecuador and Chile. Those were the two spots that I did some.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And in fact, one of the first farms that I worked on was, you know, really focused on soil building. And so I was introduced to that concept in a relatively early stage in understanding farming, which was great. Not everyone gets that experience. Yeah, so I kind of had those production, more commercial experiences, and they were all over the place. Like, one of the farms was 10 acres, one was less than an acre, market garden style, very intensive. Yeah, so I feel really lucky to have kind of a wide range of experience there. And I also did some kind of like school garden programs as well. So having worked in restaurants and being a little bit more like flavor profile oriented, that was really like where my focus went to, particularly
Yeah.
when I worked on the market garden. I was like, oh, these are chef varieties. I'm into
Yeah.
this. Yeah, and then that's what led me to high mowing. Actually, when I did a season in Vermont, we of course used high mowing seeds, and that was
Mhm.
my introduction. And I I was a customer for several years, growing on my own until I got the job.
To backtrack for just a second, it's kind of become a bit of an inside joke on the show, but anytime someone brings up working in a restaurant, were you front of house or back of house? I think I know the answer, but
I was front of house. Yeah.
okay, yeah, I knew it. I was like, you give, um, yeah, and that's always the thing. Like, I can usually tell just by sort of the attitude and the vibe that you give off. The really friendly, bubbly people tend to be front of house, while the more like grizzled, usually the more tattoos you have, the more closer to back of house, it tends to lean. So, well, as a fellow front of houser, I'm here for you.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah, it was a long time that I, supplemented my farming career with working in restaurants, as you do,
and I mean, what I love, because this is not the first time I've had conversations with like a seed rep or a seed sales rep, is and the other people I've talked to is everyone seems to have some sort of growing experience. It's not a job where it's like, well, I'm a salesman and I don't, I kind of know the product, but as long as I could sort of read the script and convince someone to buy, then it's like I can do my job. But a friend of mine who was formerly a farmer and then became kind of a regional rep for another company and is now farming again a few hours from me. It's just cool to see that it's not just like a job that you're like, well, it kind of pays the bills, but like you actually have background and experience and understand, why this quality matters, what these varieties can do, and also you understand both the geographical differences of different growing regions, but also the production sizes. Like you said, like I would not have known beforehand that you had market gardening experience, so that you understand when I'm out there on my 3/4 of an acre, like, my pain, my challenges, what I'm working with. And
Mhm.
so I think that's invaluable experience that you have to then, help aid us growers to make good selections.
Yeah, absolutely. It's relatable. Yeah, relatable experience. And I think what is amazing about that is that though I worked on farms that are more tractor oriented and more tillage oriented, I definitely know less about implements. But there are plenty of folks on the high mowing team that I can defer to if I have questions about that, or if there's something that I need to crowdsource. I can just
Mhm.
like put it out to the team, and there's usually a great response, multiple responses, and then, a pretty clear answer, most of the time, which is really great.
Yeah. So with all that in mind, what exactly do you do? And how do you, benefit us growers, when it comes to, like, picking our varieties and such?
Totally, yeah. I think most importantly, I am an available resource for growers. I again, like something I never knew uh, about companies is that they actually want to hear from growers and
Mm,
know about their experience. I think it's pretty challenging to nail this down because farmers are fluid. They're constantly working and they're constantly changing and adapting
mhm.
their systems in order to respond to what they've experienced. And so the feedback loop is incredibly important, but it gets interrupted pretty often. And like farmers are the hardest people I know to get in touch with.
Yeah.
So, because of that,
Yeah.
because constantly head down and super focused. My job is incredibly outreach focused. I work on trying to get in touch with folks, letting them know I'm available, connecting with them, doing site visits, going to conferences. But I am very available, much like an extension agent, to talk about anything that may be happening on the farm, whether that's like showing me pictures of what the crop looks like,
Mhm.
troubleshooting that, talking about trials, getting to know like what varieties work on your farm is pretty much my job.
Yeah.
It's what I'm constantly learning, and specifically how it relates to regionality and what is working better for some folks, and where the gaps are in organics and in the seed industry at large. Like, we want to know what folks need, what they are experiencing, so that we can bring that information not only to our own product development team, but to all of the other folks that we work with. If you think about us, like, we're a pretty small company, but we have a very wide reach, and we've created like really fantastic relationships with a lot of important breeders on a global scale. And we have conversations about what we need in organics, where the gaps are, and this is happening all the time on an annual cycle as well. So being able to bring that feedback directly from growers and into what we call the product development pipeline is like what helps bring new varieties into the catalog and available for growers.
And you also help on like back end issues, like when some young, inexperienced farmer shoots an email, it's like, how do I use my tax exemption? And you can help them out, which is what you've been doing for me this week.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that can happen on the back end of even just ordering seed or whatever that, because I think I initially had just called the regular number and like reached someone in the office. And then it kind of hit me. I was like, I could just reach out to Michelle. Like, why did I not? You're like, that's what she's there for. And she can help me out with
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Tax questions, account questions, discount questions, variety
Ooh, I didn't think
questions.
about discount questions. I need to
Yeah, it's
remember
a
that.
good one. And I also like to say, like, well, first of all, though High Mowing is incredibly customer service oriented, we're not the only people out there who really want to hear what's
Yeah.
going on for folks. Like, literally every single, and not only seed company, but every single industry has representatives that are there to like receive information and like advocate to improve offerings and availability and all those things. So if you don't have a connection with your reps, then you are missing out.
Absolutely. For sure. And with that, sort of to recount our first interaction, you probably had so many calls you probably don't remember. I do because I don't. I think you're one of only like two or three seed people I've talked to, so I can remember them all. But yeah, you had just sort of called me, just touching base, probably just one of the different growers on your list. And one of the things that we had talked about was kind of the varieties, like you said, that I'm growing and sort of the size and my context. And you clued me in on a really amazing sort of line of seed, which is the easy leaf lettuces. And that has been a game changer for us. Because, I think maybe tomatoes might be the only crop that there is more varieties of, other than lettuces. But lettuce is just, it's such an exhaustive list to go through. And it's like, all right, well, what's the difference between this romaine and that romaine or whatever. And especially once you get into like the high end, like lettuce mixes, then it's like just a whole world. And, I was just expressing sort of, like we're small, we're new, we can't dump a ton of money into these like really like high end pelletized seed that everybody uses, so on and so forth. Like I kind of need something that can be sort of in between, a regular head lettuce and that. And then you clued me onto that. And it's been a game changer. And I couldn't do an episode without us talking about the easy leaf lettuces because I love them so much. Can you kind of give us a little bit of an understanding about what those are and kind of how they are different than a regular old head of lettuce?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so easy leaf lettuces, you're right, they are kind of like a suite of pelleted lettuce varieties. These are bred by a company called Vitalis, which is a Dutch company, and definitely meant to parallel Salanova,
Hmm.
which is the Johnny's varieties of pelleted cut and come again
Hmm.
lettuces. Easy Leaf is, yeah, cut and come again, all pelleted. Definitely has a smaller scope of availability, which I know Vitalis will be like opening up and bringing more varieties in. But that same like green incised, red incised leaf lettuces. We do have a green oak and a red oak right now. There are no butters, but
Hmm.
butters always tend to be a little flatter anyway.
Yeah.
Um, and and yeah, they have really nice upright habit. They all have like fantastic disease resistances, very similar days to maturity and can really stand up, over the course of the cut and come again. They can also be harvested as full heads, which is
Hmm.
great and helpful. And probably the best selling point for most folks is that they are a third of the cost of Salanova, which can really be limiting if
Hmm.
you are trying to understand if your market will accept, a salad mix. I think they're a great option, and if someone is already has experience with Salanova or is Salanova oriented, I usually say like try one or two out and see if you can like fit it into your system in a way that works just because they're phenomenal. They're great. Most
Well,
people, yeah, go ahead. You can
I
speak
mean, I
to
was
it.
just gonna say, and I mean, I've talked it up so much this year that I convinced the other farm, yeah, who've been like diehard Salanova users for years, that it's like, listen, like you need to try it, blah blah blah. And then, one day it's like I got my task to like go like, here, I need you to go seed, 12 trays of lettuce or whatever. And he hands it to me and he's like, this is what you told me to get. So it better be good. And I was like, oh, it will be. And so it was kind of fun to like full circle to like really brag about how amazing it was. And then it was like, I get the responsibility of, kind of introduce them to a new farmer telling like, you guys better not let me down. Like I've talked you guys up so much. You better be awesome. But no, I loved it. And it did really well through the summertime. And Georgia summers are not easy on lettuce. And I have some that are outside right now, especially the Brookwood. Is that one of them? Yeah. I have that out there and like no cover, no nothing, just out for all the world to see, in the 20-degree temperatures and as perfect as it did in October. And so it's been a wonderful lettuce, and I could not talk about that on here. But what are some other amazing varieties that might be new in 2025 that you're like sort of excited to see out there, or that might offer something unique and different?
Yeah, absolutely. We every year we add somewhere between 40 and 70 new varieties. So we really try to bring in quite a bit. And I think the other thing that is pretty unique about high mowing is that we will always continue to offer in every crop type an open pollinated and a hybrid option as and most times an heirloom as well. So I think that's pretty unique and especially again like for the size that we are to have that variety of varieties
Mm,
is pretty awesome. This year just in the past 3 to 4 years, we've added a ton of flowers, which is
yeah.
pretty unique. And also like challenging in organics, just because like most of the time flowers are not bred to be edible. You're not like growing them only for the purpose of being edible. But we've brought in tons of great varieties. This year we have the Queenie Lime series, which are all these like kind of like tie-dye zinnias that are beautiful. There's some like peach and lime. Those are really gorgeous. I'm looking forward to growing those. We also brought in a new scabiosa, which is pretty cool. It's like a dark blue scabiosa. and a viola, which is also pretty
Mm,
exciting, which
yeah.
is an edible flower. So
Are
that's
they the small ones, the little
yeah,
ones, like for edible production? Yeah, we're I can't remember what variety we have, but yeah, we're trialing that this year for the first time.
yeah,
So,
that's pretty exciting. We also have our first organic hybrid parsnip, which is called
mm,
Panorama. A lot of smaller growers don't mess with parsnips, but I think they make a comeback.
cool. Now, I guess just a quick aside, what's your thoughts about growing that down here? Because I know they, from what I've understood, they really need some like good cold winters to sweeten up. Otherwise, they're sort of not great.
That's a good question. Yeah. And they're so, I think the challenge with parsnips is that they need so much time in the ground, right? This is another really fascinating topic that is probably a whole nother podcast in and of itself. But I've been talking more and more about, to make things even more complicated, about like changing your crop plan based on what you're seeing, like almost in real time, which is
Hmm.
obviously not what you could do when you're planting parsnips. But if you knew that it was going to be a really cold winter, then seeding, then like direct seeding your parsnips would be a fantastic idea. And you'd have like some great parsnips right now,
Mm,
instead
yeah,
of like focusing on lettuces or things that are exposed to the elements. How do you know that as a whole nother
yeah,
topic?
yeah. Because the almanac was way off this year.
Yeah, right,
They've been
right.
way off. I got to talk to Mister Franklin about that one.
Right, but there's something about, like, as we adapt to how unpredictable things
Hmm.
are, it's almost like we're still kind of adapting in there. Anyway, that's a really rough concept that I'm playing with right
I
now.
like it though. I like it. Yeah, another great variety that I think it was new last year was the Turkish delight eggplant. I've really loved that, and we grew a few varieties last year, and this year we're doubling down. We're only growing the one. My chefs love it, customers love it. They love that it's for people that are just listening or I guess watching because we're not showing it on screen. It's sort of the shape of a Chinese eggplant, sort of the long, slender eggplant, but it has that deep purple, almost black color of like your standard Italian eggplant. And it's delicious. And I think everyone loves it for the same reason. The chefs like it because it's perfect for like slicing and presenting that way. And some of the chefs, they're like, it makes the best baba ganoush they've ever had or they've ever made. And but the customers love it because it's manageable. At least in my experience with farmers market customers, nobody's wanting, giant eggplants that are the size of a newborn child. Um, and frankly, from a economic perspective, I know, like I've got to charge 5, 6 bucks a pound to make eggplant profitable. And if I'm charging $5 a pound on like a 4 pound eggplant, like no one's going to pay 20 bucks for an eggplant or even if it's 3 pounds, like no one's going to pay $15 for one eggplant. And so by having something that's like smaller and slightly unique, but still extremely recognizable and familiar, yeah, it's been a huge winner. And growing it alongside of some of the other varieties, just to see the disease resistance, pest resistance, and the proliferation. I mean, it was really impressive.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a great example of farmer feedback. Like, what do you need? Like, this is
Mhm.
why smaller butternuts exist because those giant, beautiful butternuts, your
Yep.
CSV members do not want that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm trying brulee this year for that
Nice.
very reason because it's like I wanted something that was more manageable that I could sell for a higher price per pound so that I can really make it worth it. And yeah,
Oh, I was just gonna say, and it's nice to have all of those options, and like that's why we have those options because CSAs became incredibly popular and we need a small watermelon to fit in there.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. While we're on the topic of feedback and I guess making requests, and I think I said this on our phone call that one time, but yeah, it's like if we can get some mean like sprouting broccolini varieties, you would make me extremely happy.
It is high on my list. We did add a Kylon variety this year, which is an OP. It's not a hybrid.
Mm.
So that kind of like limits, but I'm still giving out plenty of samples to mid-Atlantic growers and growers in the South. It does tend to be a little leafier on the leafier side than on the stockier side, but it does operate very similarly to like a Happy Rich. So, pretty excited about that Kylon variety as well.
And I had
Which
good luck with, I don't know, DeChico, is that how you would pronounce it? Yeah, I had good luck with that. And that was another one where I to my other farmer, who only grows one variety, I was like, "Listen, try it. It's great." And it's been good this year. So,
Yeah, and
getting some
that's when
feedback.
when I would, I don't know if you do this already, but I would like pop the first like main growth in order to promote
Yeah.
more side shoots. If you haven't already played with that, that's definitely what I would do.
Yeah. I think even just conversations, we're almost getting into just like a regular sort of like update call that we would have.
Yeah.
But I mean, but really, this is what's so invaluable about having you as a resource for me as a farmer is that, you understand my challenges, you understand the context, but then also you have the seed perspective and the knowledge on that end to be able to sort of fill in the gaps where I don't. I had a conversation with another farmer at the market on Saturday, and they were sort of complaining about not being able to find a particular tomato variety that they used to get. It's one of those ones where it's like, I don't remember. It wasn't your company, but I can't remember the variety. But they're like, we used it for years, and it was like our standard bearer as far as like beefsteak tomatoes. And then now they can't get it anymore. And they were talking to the person on the phone, and they were like, I think it was just someone in the front office. Like you could tell they were. She was like, it sounded like they were flipping through the catalog, like trying to just like give me a suggestion with like no real experience. And I was like, have you reached out to your seed rep for them, like your sales rep for them? And they're like, oh no, I didn't know they had those. Like, oh my gosh, like not only that, they have them that are specifically geared towards like our growing region. So they know exactly what we're doing. And I was able to shoot her over the contact information. I'm going to send her yours too. I'm like, go buy them from High Mowing. Michelle, hook you up. Uh, and it's just like it's such an invaluable resource to be able to have someone who one wants our feedback but also can give us valuable wisdom and information to help us become better growers.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, heirlooms, I'll give a couple more examples because we're talking about this, but heirlooms were like rapidly grew in popularity, let's say 7 to 10 years ago.
Mhm.
But the problem with heirlooms is that they crack and split, they don't produce, they
Yep.
have blossom end rot, like whatever the reason is. And so through breeding, we now have hybrid heirlooms, which give they are heirlooms. They have the physical traits of heirlooms. They look like heirlooms. They're beautiful. They have color variation, but they have the disease resistance, the productivity, the yields, and they are specifically made for like greenhouse high tunnel production.
Yeah.
So that's one big, lift on in the seed world. And I think also, chicories is also worth
Mm.
talking about, like, really gaining in popularity. Chefs are more likely to try them, and it also helps, as a season extension crop for a lot of folks who have high tunnels. And so being able to bring in more options in that regard, helps everyone and, like, also builds a new market. Like, there's always education that goes along with building a new market, but yeah, it's a cool opportunity.
Yeah, obviously Crystal Organic where I come from, Nicholas is a big proponent and yeah, and you guys have sent him some different radicchio seed to try. And I feel like I'm sort of catching the chicory bug. I don't love the taste of them, but I love growing them. And yeah, and we're increasing our endive and frisee production this year because I've had chefs ask for it. So yeah, I'm right there with you on the chicories.
Hickory train.
Yeah. Woo woo. Uh, and all right, so to kind of wrap things up, I'll just say once again, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me and just answering some of my other non-podcast related questions offline. But if people want to either reach out to you, if they're currently growing and buying stuff from High Mowing and they didn't realize that they had such an amazing asset in you and the rest of the team, or if they are maybe interested in purchasing from High Mowing for the first time, what's the best way for people to sort of get in touch?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's always www.highmowingseeds.com. I can absolutely give you my contact information, and you can share it on in the notes of the podcast.
Yeah,
There's also an entire page for high mowing reps, so you can easily discover which rep is yours based on where you are in the US or Canada. Um, you can follow me at Michelle underscore high mowing on Instagram. Uh, and my email is incredibly long, but you can email me there. You can call or text me at 802 473-1565. Sometimes I forget, it's written on my wall. Yeah, there's so many ways to engage. Or you could just call the main high mowing line and tell them where you are, and they'll transfer you to directly to your rep.
awesome. Well, Michelle, thank you so much again, and we'll be in touch further. Thank you.
Sounds great. Yeah. Thanks so much.
All right. Another amazing interview in the books here at the best podcast for small scale agriculture in the universe. Big thanks to Michelle for sitting down and talking with us. We have chit chatted on the phone a couple of times, and it was really nice to get to kind of see each other digitally face to face. I've always been a big fan of High Mowing, and so it's really cool to get a little bit of the behind the scenes scoop on what makes them such a great seed company. And I will be filling out my seed order after this podcast is over so that I can make sure I get all those good seeds in so that we can have a successful 2025 here at Crop Culture Farm, thanks to the good people over at High Mowing. As always, big shout out to Diego and the whole crew over at Modern Grower. None of this would be possible without you, whether it's tools, landscape fabric, row cover, hoops, seeders, planters, everything that you need. Go over to shop.moderngrower.co and you can pick up the curated, perfectly chosen tools that you need to become a better grower and a modern grower. You can also check out all the other podcasts that Diego puts out. And if you didn't know, there's a YouTube channel and there's tons of amazing content over there as well. Diego puts out some instructional videos, things that really complement our content really well. So you can also go and subscribe to the Modern Grower YouTube channel, as well as listen to all the amazing podcasts and all the amazing interviews that Diego puts out. And as always, we want to remind you that this is a value for value podcast, which means we give you this podcast is our value. We don't charge you for it. There's no plus bundles or hidden paywalls or anything like that. We just want to give you everything that we can for free. And we ask that you kick back some of that value our way. So if this is valuable to you, please consider donating $1, $5, 15, $1,500, whatever it may be. Every little bit and every big amount helps. So go over to Cash App, Venmo, or PayPal, look for at Crop Culture Farm, our farm, and kick us a few bucks so that we can continue to make this show possible. Thank you. Once again, I'm your host, Alec Smith, and you have been listening to the Rookie Farmer Podcast. Until next time, peace.